I drove up to the parking lot one morning and I was holding on to the wheel and I couldn't let go of the wheel. I was so done. I had a vision that I'm going to this business is going to end me.
Do you feel like your business cannot run without you? Meet Ivan. He built a highly successful company, but soon realized he was doing all the hard work himself.
They delegated, they tried to hand things off, they tried to stay away. You may think you're running away fast, but decision gravity will get you and pull you back in. Anytime a crisis comes or anything out of the ordinary comes, anything that puts the business at risk, had a standard that was extremely high. Now in hindsight, I would call it an impossible standard. And so all that impossible, diluted standard was doing was creating stress, tension, and conflict in the business. And it was stressing out the entire system. So it actually prevented us to do our best work because we were pushing against something that was never going to happen.
He found a simple way to take the high standards out of his own head and teach them to his team so he could finally step away.
I went from an 80-hour work week down to 2 hours, gradually, obviously. I went to 60, then 40, when gradually I was only working 2 hours a week on site. Somewhere from deep inside came a question: what kind of man stays home on a Wednesday? Well, the kind of man that stays home on a Wednesday is the kind of man that built a business that can run properly, effectively, and strongly without me being on the shop floor.
If you want to stop doing all the daily tasks and start actually growing your company, this episode is for you. Today's conversation is about something most founders don't want to admit. When the business depends entirely on them, it's not really a business. I've been there. So my guest today, who's lived that reality, I guess it was 2008 when his aerospace company lost more than 90% of its revenue in one single month. And what followed, it wasn't just a recovery, but it was a complete rebuild and how a business should actually function. He's going to talk about that today. He's the creator of Shift Intelligence, working with founders whose business still runs through them, helping move that standard out of their heads and into the company itself. Ivan, welcome to Bold Conscious Connections.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So that moment, the 2008, take us back. You were sitting in that parking lot, right? Because you write in that book. Before you open the door, what's the honest conversation that you're having with yourself in that moment?
Well, it was a really difficult time. I remember not sleeping. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. every night and high customer concentration at that point. And when the financial collapse happened, we went from 530,000 in revenue to 37,000 in revenue, 93% drop from one month to the next. And not a lot of companies survive that. And so during the time of trying to find a solution during that major drop, I was devastated, and I was thinking I put my family at risk. I put my wife and children at risk. I was publicly unraveling. There was nowhere to go. I try to be brave, try to protect everything, the people there, everything, but it was not gonna go the way I wanted to.
So when that kind of stuff happens, and this is your business at the time, it was your own, right? Is that correct? You're the founder. What did you first believe immediately? What was the cause of what happened, apart from blaming yourself?
It wasn't really my fault, but that didn't help at all. It didn't matter. It wasn't really my fault. I thought I did everything right. Just 6 months prior to this, we were on top of the world, just moved in a state-of-the-art facility, closed a 5-year contract that ensured our growth and trajectory. We were flying high. I remember standing in the facility looking around and thinking, we've finally arrived. It was like one of those moments you dream about. And boom, within 6 months of that moment, we were pretty much toast. We were done. And the contrast of that was really, really tough to swallow.
So when did the story of that collapse and then all that stop working for you? Because you keep telling the story then like, oh, well, it's my fault or whatever it was, right? Because circumstantial and so on and so forth. But then that story doesn't last that long because you got to then do something.
Yeah, I had to do something, and Luckily, I was involved in an advisory board with Keith Cunningham, and I flew over to the board meeting in Austin, and I remember sitting in the boardroom and just looking down, yeah, just dire straits. There's nowhere to go, and eight board members looking at me, and nobody talking, and the numbers on the screen, and it was very hard. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to face the music, and the board pretty much said you have 2 months of runway, and if you don't do something, that's it. That's going to be it for this business. And they proposed a major cut. They proposed a very deep cut. You know, they said you probably got to cut down into the fat, the muscle, and probably some bone. So we made the cuts. It was very deep. It was 75% of staff had to go, and I d- I said no, no way I can send these people home. I can't do it. And they just looked at me and said, you know what? We're not protecting jobs at this point. We're protecting for a chance to come back. So we made the cuts, and we were we tried to do something constructive while that was going on. So we prepared and got certified in AS 9100 and did all the work and prep. We were preparing for the work we didn't have, for the orders that weren't coming, and somehow in kept clawing and trying for to get some traction. And in month 7, we got a small customer that gave us that little bit of a crack of light and a chance to survive. And without the deep cuts, we would have never been there. And that gave us a shot, which we took and then ran with it. And within 6 months, we were able to hire most of the people back. And then the recovery started. The the industry recovered. Everything started to come back, and it turned out okay eventually. But during that time, it was very rough.
So, what specifically, Ivan, about you had a change, not just the business? I would imagine those are not separable at that point.
Well, it was a big grow up moment. I really had to feel and understand in my own body that uh, life and business are uncertain. There's no guarantee anywhere. And not only uncertain, impermanent.
Mhm.
And so, and you could be doing everything correctly. You could be doing everything right, and it still might not turn out right.
Mhm.
And so it was a big growing moment for me. And from that point on, I had a much different relationship with the business and much different relationship with life. And the funny story is that I ran a catastrophe budget for 13 years after that. So every month had a catastrophe budget next to the actual budget. Uh, that we were projecting on. So every month from then, that was what, 150 months before we ended up selling.
Huh.
150 months, we ran a catastrophe budget. We always knew if the catastrophe hit, what we were going to do and how we were going to do it.
All right, so let's talk about that shift because that's really what you're all about, right? Because how long ago was it you sold the business?
We sold the business in 2022, January in 2022. So it's been 4 years.
Where did you struggle the most to let go?
We wrote a book on this subject. So we told this story across 160 pages, and you're asking me a question now that really interestingly is popping up a new answer, which is strange. What did I struggle the most? Yeah, this part is not in the book. So
I want to
I
hear
s-
it.
yeah, great question. I struggled the most with I had a vision. I had a vision in my mind what this thing's gonna be like and what's it gonna turn out like. Um, in hindsight, I would say I had a standard that was extremely high. Now, in hindsight, I would call it an impossible standard. I had an impossible standard in my own mind what we're going to do here. Well, how we're going to do this thing and how it's going to work and how the people going to behave and how I'm going to behave and how everything's going to function. And you can make God laugh a lot with these kinds of things. So I did that for a long time. I made him laugh for a long time. And I stressed out for a long time doing that. And finally, somewhere along the way, I realized that the only thing I'm achieving with this impossible standard is to stress the hell out of myself and the business and the people running the business with me. And so all that impossible diluted standard was doing was creating stress, tension, and conflict in the business. And it was stressing out the entire system. So it actually prevented us to do our best work because we were pushing against something that was never going to happen. And letting go of that was the hardest thing. That got to be added back into the book, Raju.
Well, so how did you then finally, if you have a standard, you have a standard. That's it. If it's non-negotiable, you're obsessed with it, right? Clearly, you're that kind of guy, like probably I am. That's why we got along. Um, what what ultimately makes it let go? Is it the catastrophe budget you look at one side, and that's why you actually implemented that, or is it something else?
No, it was a lot more pain, Raju. It was a decade more of pain
Oh,
of not giving up on the standard. It was pushing against impossible odds. It was pretty much. I drove up to the parking lot one morning, uh, and I was holding on to the wheel, and I couldn't let go of the wheel. I was so done. I
oh.
was not walking back in there walking into the building and encountering that same thing that was forever gonna resist the impossible standard.
But that is
I
not
couldn't
to say that
do
you
it.
compromise your standard afterward, did you?
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore. So then I was holding on to the wheel, and I had a vision that I'm gonna have a this business is gonna end me. This business is gonna be the end of me. And the reason why I'm doing it for my family, they're gonna end up without me because this is going to be the result of chasing the impossible. In that moment, I decided that that's not going to be my story. That's not going to be. I'm not going to be the owner that died trying to make the things happen that were never going to happen. And from that point on, it took about 3 years of very concerted effort. This is what we do now with founders and owners of rebuilding the business from scratch in a way that didn't need me to be the hero, to be the savior, to be the fire extinguisher, to be any of those roles that we typically play in businesses, and building people and capacity and communication and strategy and really building this thing together so that even if I never showed up, this thing was gonna function at the top of its potential. And we did. We took about 3 years. I think for most businesses, that's how long it's going to take. Our business was a very demanding, difficult, technical business. When something goes wrong for us, maybe a plane falls from the sky. We have millions of parts flying in the air right now, carrying people through the air safely. So this is a very, very responsible kind of business, and we're very very proud of what we built and how it ran and how it's still running. So that's the story on that. Uh, what is a lot more attractive, Raju, is what is possible. Taking things all the way to that possible potential, rather than chasing the impossible that is never going to happen and killing yourself over it.
But the core idea, your book is titled, Shift Intelligence, right? That's the book. When your team finally gets it, what what do you mean by what it gets it? I mean, what does that look like in the business?
So when your team finally gets it, that is a code word for someone who has tried to get people to understand their secret standard inside of their head.
The one you just described, the so-called impossible standard.
That's right. And so they've been going for maybe 10, 20 years trying to like psychically uh, expecting the other people to do what they're thinking secretly in their mind, and never actually transferring it, never actually extracting it. Most founders are unconsciously competent geniuses, multi-talented individuals, unicorns in their own professions. And so, as such,
Unconscious or conscious?
unconsciously competent, meaning they are so good,
Yeah,
their automatic behaviors are so high level that they can't retrace how they do it. They just have the feeling of how it needs to be done,
that's
and
right.
they do it, and they expect other people to get that. And one of the major processes in our book and in our journey is something called the success DNA, where we extract those secret strategies and tactics and standards and feelings and the essence of the business, of why the business succeeded in the first place and what the founder did to make it succeed, and how it can continue to succeed with other people, so that other people can get a sense of what that is, understand what it is, feel what that is, and actually put into practice
Mhm.
together with the founder, and eventually run on their own.
So I assume this business now is a consulting business that you do, and it doesn't have to do with aerospace, but just anybody that the founder that you're helping, right?
Yes, it could be any founder anywhere. What is in common with all the founders is what I already said. So any founder can do it. The founders that have the hardest time are the ones that depend on a lot of people. You know, if you're running a software company, you know, you can get your get your thoughts and mind and standards into the software. Software will repeat. But
Mhm.
if you have to have boots on the ground of people doing service or any kind of work, or you're building physical things or whatever it might be, you need people for leverage. You need more people doing more things, and for those founders, it's especially more difficult. But yeah, any founder pretty much
Mhm.
can trap themselves in their own business.
So the book is about the secret sauce that you came up with, you and your wife, to like extract this so-called genius of that the unique founder, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So when you wrote the book, uh, what part of your own journey were you really trying to put in words, given the background you just talked about?
Well, the book is all about our experience. It's very experiential book. It puts you in the trench with us. It puts you on the journey. Every chapter opens with a story from lived experience. This is not something we learned in a book. This is a lived experience, tried, tested, proven. This is work for us, and it's work for many of our clients. It's a really a journey of truth, is what you're reading in that book. And um, the entire book is built on real, true stories of how what happened to us and why it happened and how it happened and what we did about it and what we discovered in the process. And it flows from the story to the lesson to the practice that is needed to create the same results.
And you say it's for long tenure founders, 10 years minimum. Having had that 10 years behind them, is that what you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about. And there's a specific reason for that, because there hasn't been enough pain built
Yeah.
on previous to that. Maybe some people in their seventh year already built enough pain, or they have enough awareness
21
to.
years here, and
Yes, but it's not typical that someone would choose to do this deep level of work. Most founders have a lot more pain resistance, pain tolerance. They are pushing through things, and they're still young, and they want to go after it, and they want to prove that impossible thing, and they want to run. And I've done it. I'm not, this is not pointing fingers. I've done it. And from experience, when we talk to people, we talk to a lot of people, and they say, "Oh no, that's not my. Oh, it's okay."
you don't
They,
understand my problem. I'm unique. I'm different, and all that stuff.
yeah, I got this. I don't need any help, and all of this. And typically, our best clients, the clients that really are ready, are the ones that tried EOS, that hired a COO, that delegated, that tried to hand things off, that tried to stay away, that stepped back, that did all these things, but then when the push comes to shove, they still get pulled in on the major decision. The however far they want to pull back, they keep getting pulled back in by the business. We call that the decision gravity. Decision gravity is like an incredible force. It's like the gravitational pull of the earth. Decision gravity pulls you back in faster than you may think you're running away fast, but decision gravity will get you and pull you back in anytime a crisis comes or anything out of the ordinary comes, anything that puts the business at risk. And so you're back in there. So that's the reason for why the longer tenured founders typically tend to become more ready
Hmm.
for this kind of conversation
Because
and
they've
the
been
depth
beaten and beaten
required.
up enough to wake up, hopefully.
They
But if
haven't
I
tried.
hadn't,
They haven't tried enough things that didn't work yet.
so if I hadn't spoken with you or spoken with you and personally, I actually was like, oh, this book is going to be about standards of standard operating procedure, SOP type of thing, and like how many more SOPs and documentation would you do, and how you think can be put on paper. So that's so now I feel like, oh my God, this is much
Yes.
more than
Here's,
that. It's not an SOP.
let me step on the soapbox of the SOPs. Okay, we wrote we wrote a book. I mean, we ran a business that was in the aerospace industry. AS9100 requires you to have every SOP in the universe. So for 10 years straight, we had 100% compliance in the AS9100 standard, where we have a physical audit every year by the governing body, where an auditor will come on site and check your underpants. And so for 10 years plus, we had every single one of those things that you just named: the SOPs, the documents, the documentation, the checklist, the procedures, all of that thing. And then
So how do you advise founders who are in that mode, like, okay, I've done this, it's my juice that's not coming through in the processes and the systems I've created. How could that be implemented? I mean, the founder is either exiting or dying or whatever it is, right? What happens to the business?
how can the deeper layer be implemented?
Yes.
Yeah, through the success DNA process, we have to sit down like this and ask very insightful questions like you're asking on this podcast,
Mm.
and make the founder think on the deeper places of how he thinks, how he does, how he feels, what he sees, what he notices, what he pays attention to.
Mhm.
What happens in a crisis? How do you communicate to customers? How do you communicate with the
Well, that's in
people?
the SOP. That's in the SOP, he'll say.
That is not in the SOP.
It's got a BCP plan, you got whatever, contingency plans, right?
Well, yes, you can have the nuts and bolts of that, but the sensitive part that will make the founder trust hasn't been said yet. So when the push comes to shove and they need to trust someone else to do it, unless they verbalized it, unless they saw the eyes of the other person get it, unless they observe the other person do it,
Mm.
they don't trust it.
Okay, so this is the question then. In that case, I've been like thinking about this. Was there a moment in your case where your team made a decision you wouldn't have made, and it worked?
Yes, there's a chapter in the book that covers it. We had a quality complaint from our largest customer, and it was they said we it was a defective part, and we got a rejection, and the parts came back, and my team was saying, no, it's not our fault, it's not our fault. I've heard that story before. And I was like, okay, what really happened here? They said it's not our fault. I said, well, how do you know? They said, okay, wait a couple hours, we're gonna do some experiments, and then we'll call you over. So they call me over, and they're like, okay, it's not our fault, here's the proof. They pulled the packaging out, and they took a scalpel, and they recreated the exact rejection that the receiving inspector on their side made when they opened the box. And I was like, wow, okay, that is deep. Okay, and so what's your communication plan? Because we cannot upset this customer. And they pretty much described how they're going to diplomatically do the same experiment over there. and the defect was exact. It was undeniable. And I finally said, "Wow, I would have never come up with that. Okay, let the quality manager go down there and do this." We talked about it, how to do it. This is the first time that a major rejection with the largest customer went handled by someone else and not by me. And from that point on, I started trusting him a lot more. I still was verifying, but I started trusting more.
Mhm.
And that was the first major instance.
So then, this is obviously a simpler question. What's the one thing, Ivan, you stopped doing as a founder that changed everything?
What did I stop doing?
Yes.
I stopped showing up. And that is in the book also.
Mm.
So I was doing periodic intentional absence.
Mm.
And you
Because by
don't.
that time you had already implemented whatever you want to implement with your team, et cetera,
Yes,
right?
yes. So it
Okay.
was a gradual process, but I went from an 80-hour work week down to 2 hours. Gradually, obviously. I went to 60, then 40, and gradually I was only working 2 hours a week on site. And that was intentional because I wanted to make sure that they got it. And how do we know they got it? They got it when they got it. They got it when I'm not there, and they got it. And that was the thing I stopped doing. But I remember that was not easy. That was very hard, and this is in the book as well. This is called the Wednesday question, and it was a Wednesday morning, and I was in my kitchen looking out at the trees, uh, having some water, and I had the somewhere from deep inside came a question, and it said, "What kind of man stays home on a Wednesday?" And I tell you what, the answers were not pretty. This is like your ancestors, your father and grandfather calling you out, and your own manhood calling you out, and I stood my ground. All that energy was passing through me. All the thoughts were passing through me, and I was like, that was really a tough moment. And I decided, besides the noise, to make a declaration and say, well, the kind of man that stays home on Wednesday is the kind of man that built a business that can run properly, effectively, and strongly without me being on the plant, without me being on the shop floor. And that took a lot to say. I mean, those are the gremlins inside of all of us that say, you are what you do. You are the work you do is who you are, and that's it. And if you're not doing that kind of work, you're not you. The sense of value of your inner intrinsic dignity isn't there. And so that's the final gremlin. When you've already built everything, you're going to have that to contend with, because it's going to continue wanting to pull you back over there to your identity, to what you know, to what you built, to what is your proudest thing. And for a lot of people, that's okay. That's perfectly fine. And if you know that there's more for you to do, and there's more for you to be, and something beyond the business, because I am my business and my business is me, is a great thing that you can live for and with and for a long time. But ultimately, it's not true. It's not true. And when you're going to tackle that, it's up to you. But that's got to be faced. And it's kind of like when your oldest goes to college for the first time, he goes away from home, and you're so proud, you're so proud. Look at this. Wow, wow, I'm so proud. But there's a inside, there's like, oh, there's a sense of kind of a mixed sweet, bittersweet feeling.
But it's a
And
loss as well because he may not come except for Christmas or whatever, he won't be back, right?
and that's how it is with your business too. And that is the healthiest thing. That means that the business is doing great.
What did being bold for you actually look like for you internally? I mean, how aware were you, or were you showing up when back then versus now?
I had to be bold to let all those people go to give us a chance to survive. I had to be bold when I was in the parking lot, and it was, do you keep pushing or do you go into the unknown? It was the unknown that won, because I said to myself, even if this business doesn't survive, this is the right thing to do. There's no, even if this business doesn't make it, I cannot be the one having a heart attack over it. So, you have to step into the uncertainty fully, knowing that the direction is the right direction, whether you reach the destination or not. So, those are some of the bold moments, and I had to be bold, facing the music of what my father and grandfather would think of me sitting home on a Wednesday. That is a tough one. That is tougher than you think, tougher than you know. And uh, those are all the bold moments. And now the bold moments are, stepping out, telling the truth, and writing a book, and all these things, stepping in and continuing to find the next evolution, the next step of progress, the next step of expansion. Um, you know, being bold is great, and in certain circumstances, um, it could be reckless. And when you're running an aerospace business, being bold and being safe at the same time, that's not an easy thing. And a lot of people encounter this a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot at stake. There's the sacred cows, that you're going to be bold against. There's a lot of loyalty of everything that's come before now that is pulling you away from being bold. So I love the bold, conscious leadership. That's bold is amazing. Conscious gives it some restraint, and leadership tells it all.
Well, so I written down a question for you. It's called when the business no longer depends on you, what happens to you? So you kind of touched on that, with the Wednesday sitting at, with your coffee and or water rather, looking out the window, and then all the gremlins start talking to you, like my dad still talks to me after 25 years. But yeah. So glad you answered that. So that's the identity shift that you made. It sounds like. Is that fair to say?
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true, and that's the final frontier, if you would. That's the entrepreneur's PhD moment, and the graduation.
Okay, well, so here's your chance to do this graduation for this last main point question. So for founders who say they want a business that runs without them, right? But keep themselves at the center of it, what are they holding on to?
That is a tough one. They could be holding on to several things. They could be holding on to their identity, because who am I that is not running this thing? That's a big one. They could be holding on to the certainty, the control that they provided this thing for a long time, and now the biggest certainty they lean on is always their own eyes, their own presence, their own checking, their own control. They don't believe or trust the other control. They believe in their own, because that's how they've built this thing. So certainty, control, identity, and then superiority, because every time they say, they can't do it, it reinforces in their own mind the legend of who they are.
One word for that 2008 version of you.
Broken,
One word for you today.
growing,
A habit you dropped.
believing in my own bullshit.
Guys, you better pay attention to this one. Something you trust more now.
The natural order of life.
Beautiful. I love that. Something you take less seriously.
Myself.
A decision you're glad you made fast.
Um, Not having a heart attack.
Something your team does today that makes you really proud.
People are having careers that would have never been possible had they not worked at our business.
Wow. Okay. An example or somebody comes to mind that you want to
Um,
shout out to?
yeah, we have lots of those people. I wouldn't want to name anyone in particular, but we get messages still of thank you, boss. I am now working for Raytheon, for all the major manufacturers, and this would have never been possible. My kid is in college, and we train from the ground up back in our business. So that is always special when you get that unprompted message 5 years later.
One thing that matters more to you now than before.
Um, Being a good steward.
Okay, guys. So I was gonna talk a bit more about the book, but the book is based on the work you've done, and the work that you do is also based on the book. Get this book, Shift Intelligence. The subtitle, as you know, is When Your Team Finally Gets It. So that's the message to founders. Uh, and then, of course, and can reach out to you, right, Ivan, and your wife, Mariana?
Yes, shiftintelligence.co is where they can find us online, and Ivan at shiftintelligence.co. They can reach me by email. We're very active on LinkedIn. You can find us on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has a tremendous newsletter that hits pretty hard on these topics. So we welcome everyone into our world.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show, Bold Conscious Connections. And until next time,
Thank you.
I am saying goodbye.